My guest at this time is a former WWE superstar who stars in the upcoming film I Am Vengeance, Retaliation. It is Stu Bennett. Stu, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on, Nick.
No problem, Stu. Well, I had the pleasure today of getting to work. And work for me was watching this movie that you are in with Vinnie Jones. And man,
they're paying you for that?
I know. Talk to my boss, Raj. This is
sweet gig.
I know, no kidding. Well, you got the sweet gig, man. You got to work with Vinnie Jones, which was...
hang on a minute. I got beat up by Vinnie Jones. Let's not pretend it was too sweet. I got paid for it, yes, and it was a lot of fun, but I did get beat up.
Let's start.
Which is kind of how I make my money. Let's be honest.
Well, let's start there then, man. Like, we can talk about all kinds of different aspects of the movie, but what is that like, fighting Vinnie Jones? He's a terrifying man.
Yeah, you've got to put it in perspective too. Like, I'm a kid of the 80s. I was born in 1980 and obviously British. And Vinnie Jones in the UK in the 80s was pretty much the equivalent of Mike Tyson. Certainly in the media, he was the most terrifying man on the planet, and he was on football pitches, kicking hell out of everybody. So as a kid watching him, yeah, he was a frightening prospect. But then he went on and had this amazing film career too, which I was a fan of. So to get to work with that guy who I've kind of held in an esteemed position for pretty much my entire life was awesome. And it was a lot of fun working with him too. But yeah, kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, dude. I mean, if you don't like Lock, Stock, or Snatch, I mean, are you really a movie person? I don't think you are.
Exactly. Yeah. The funny thing was, when I first moved to the US in 2007, I was in Ohio Valley Wrestling and Florida Championship Wrestling. Whenever I would talk to the guys, the American guys, the Puerto Ricans, whoever it was, they all wanted to talk about Vinnie Jones because they'd all seen, Euro Trip and Snatch and all this stuff. And that was their idea of a British film star was Vinnie Jones. I think it's probably more Jason Statham these days, but back at that point, certainly he was the number one British star, I think, certainly in the US.
Yeah, man, iconic. That's the thing is, when I saw you guys next to each other, I was like, man, good for Stu. This is like a legitimate thing, Yeah,
I ain't gonna lie. I was very excited when they called me and said, hey, we've got the villain for the second one. It's Vinnie Jones.
Oh, man.
Pretty amazing,
No kidding, man. And so, like, you're getting to spend a lot of time on set because you guys are in, like, almost every scene together, right? There's very few scenes you're not together. What was it like getting to share the set with him? Did you learn as an actor things from him? Like, what was that like? What was that relationship?
Yeah, well, when we got Vinnie, I knew that two things were going to happen. I knew he was going to put in an incredible performance because, for what we needed for this film, there's no one better on the planet for that kind of villain performance. And we've seen it many times from him. He is the absolute best at that.
Yeah.
I also knew that we were going to get a lot of spotlight on the movie by virtue of the fact that he was associated with it. So those were two things that I took for granted. What I didn't think about was the fact that Vinnie has been in about 100 films. He's worked with the absolute best in Hollywood, including actors and directors and cameramen, and every part of the film industry. He has worked with the absolute best, which is true if you look at his record. So what he also brought to the film was advice for me as a performer, advice for the director, advice for tweaking scripts, advice for the camera guys, how to set up shots. Like, his level of knowledge was incredible. And that's something that I think people don't realize about a guy like Vinnie. When you see the terrifying character that he is, both on and off set, he can be like that. And you kind of neglect the fact that he has this brilliant mind for the movie industry too. And we all benefited hugely from that.
Wow, that's awesome to hear, man. And so, like, you're getting to spend all this time and watch him work. I mean, what did he know about you? Was he a wrestling fan? Was he like, man, Nexus, what happened there? Like, what's Vinnie?
Yeah, I don't think he's a modern day wrestling fan so much. He's actually worked with WWE quite a bit in the past. He did some stuff with Stone Cold Steve Austin in the past. I think he brought him down to the ring at one of the old UK only pay-per-views in the early 2000s or late 90s. So he's aware of it. He'd worked coincidentally just before I did the film with him. He'd worked on a show called Arrow with sorry, I forget the guy's
Stephen
name.
Amell.
Stephen Amell, there we go. There, of course, I've wrestled him before, of course, SummerSlam. But he coincidentally in the episode he was in, Cody Rhodes was also in. So Vinnie had just left the set with Cody before he came to shoot with me. So he'd been chatting to Cody about AEW and all this stuff. So he was kind of up on the wrestling world before he came to work with me. And in addition to that, he'd been in. There was a WWE movie in the early 2000s that had like Nathan Jones in and Stone Cold, The Condemned.
Yeah.
So he'd worked up with them on that, and so he was pretty familiar with the wrestling world. I don't think he watches so much today. I don't know if he knew who I was or not. I didn't really get into that, but I spent 90% of the time chatting with Vinnie. talking about his 80s and 90s soccer career. So I was pestering him every day for stories about big matches and rivalries and stuff like that. And I'm sure he was sick of me by the end of it. But he was he humored me and gave me all the info and gossip and all that stuff. So
Man,
I was a fanboy.
No kid. Well, who wouldn't be, man? Like, I'm living vicariously through you right now. I'm glad you took advantage of that, you know? So with the comes, all the fight scenes I thought were really interesting because obviously you come from a fight background, right? Bare knuckle stuff and also like pro wrestling and all that. How does that help you when you put together all these fight scenes? I noticed there was I think you did a side suplex on Vinny at one point. And I was like, I don't know that you do that in a normal fight.
So the interesting thing about kind of screen or film fighting is very different to the kind of fighting we do in pro wrestling. And what we do in pro wrestling is a lot of ad-lib and improv in the matches. And we are connecting as much as we're not trying to kill each other in the ring. We are connecting. In film, it's very different. And for the most part, you're not connecting at all. And they're very clever with the camera angles that they film stuff. So there was definitely a learning process about how to fight on film versus how to fight in the wrestling ring. But something I try and do is I realize that if you compare me to some of the top on-screen fighters today, a lot of them are very much these kind of martial artist ninja types who, do a triple backflip, kick to the face, bounce off a wall and punch you 3 times before they've landed. Kind of the Will Osprey style of is very in at the moment. And believe me, that's never going to be me. So the one thing I try and do, I try and bring something to my fight scenes that no other kind of film fighter would ever do. So if I'm throwing in a wrestling move or something like that, it will work for me because I'm bigger and more powerful than my opponent for 90% of the time. Yeah. And I'm not going to try and do the kind of moves that they will do. So I'll always try and incorporate something wrestling in there for pretty much for fans of the film fighting genre who never get to see that kind of thing. They might not be watchers of wrestling, but I'll try and throw a little bit in here and there just to make me different to anyone else out there.
I gotcha. And on the note of Will Osprey, have you seen him? He's not slim anymore. He's trying to be beefy. I don't know.
Will's a great guy. I follow him on Twitter and all that stuff. He's a hell of a performer, man. He's suddenly bulked up, right?
Yeah, he's I don't know that I'm going to come back flippy floppy Will Osprey. I think I'm going to come
heavyweight now.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to be you. I think he's going to come back.
Maybe I'll come back as him. I'll lose about 100 pounds and probably break my neck in my first match. So, yeah, I definitely won't be trying that.
What a world to live in there. You do a lot of work with guns in this movie. It had a kind of Keanu Reeves style feel to me. How familiar were you with firearms before getting into this genre and everything like that?
Zero. I have no background in that at all, as do probably most Brits. It's not part of our culture at all, really. Obviously, it's a very big part of the American culture. So I think that was my 5th film that I've been in, and in all 5 films, I've had guns in them. So I remember the first couple, I found it very difficult to understand how to walk with a gun and be convincing firing it and holding it and things like that. But by this one, I've used them so much on set that I'm very comfortable with them. But it's always fun. I think I used 6 or 7 different types of gun in this film. I couldn't tell you what any of them were, but one was a really big one was a little small. It's a shotgun. Yeah. So I'm not an expert in guns, and I'm probably offending somebody at home now who takes real pride in that. But yeah, it's really cool to get to work with that. And the armorers are all kind of Army guys and special forces guys, and they bring their guns to set. It's obviously tight restrictions and things like that, even more so in the UK, I think, than in the US. And they're very excited to show off all their weaponry and things like that. And we tried to highlight that in the film because this film really is an ode to the 80s style of action films, which I grew up on and I don't think necessarily are shown so much today. So it's really an ode to that.
Dude, it's nonstop. It's 82 minutes of just pure adrenaline. It's you start from the get-go with literally shotgun blasting a dude in the chest, not to give anything away. But from there on out, it's just high speed all the way through. Yeah, before we kind of, spin off into a couple other things, you want to tell fans what they can expect from this film. What is this film about, in your words?
Yeah, sure. Well, the lucky thing if you're in the US is you can watch the first movie, which is just called I Am Vengeance. That's actually on Netflix right now. That one was successful globally, so we got an increased budget to make a second one. Now, it is a second one. It is technically a sequel, although it's completely standalone. So if you haven't seen the first one, doesn't matter. You can watch this one, and there's no real backstory that needs to be filled in. It was written specifically that way. So this is very much a film about me being the hero, which most people have never seen me in that kind of position before. Certainly in my wrestling career, I was always the villain. And I am leading a team of special forces operatives who are out to take down a guy who used to work with us, who we thought was dead, but it turns out he's been off the radar. He's been alive, and he's leading a band of mercenaries. So we're sent out to take him and his team down and bring them to justice. And that villain, of course, is Vinnie Jones, and I'm flanked by a team of great actors myself, and there's a couple of amazing female fighters in the film too, who I think people are going to be very impressed by. So please check it out. Let me just give you the release details, because these are very specific. Okay, I actually printed this off because I didn't want to mess it up. It says, in the US, the movie, which is called I Am Vengeance Retaliation, it comes out on the 19th of June on all major digital platforms and on DVD through Saban Films and Lionsgate. And the caveat is, in the UK, it comes out a little later. It comes out on Monday, the 13th of July in the UK. That's through Evolutionary Films, and it will be released on Sky Store, Amazon, iTunes, Virgin Store, Microsoft, and Google Play. So that's the UK. But remember, 19th of June is the US release. So there we go.
Very cool. Very cool. And if your character had some news to deliver to Vinnie Jones, would it be good news?
I'm too scared to give Vinnie Jones any kind of bad news. I'll be perfectly honest with you.
Okay.
He's a terrifying man in real life. And we saw little bits of that kind of offset, which was fantastic, because I would have been disappointed if we didn't see that. But Vinnie gets whatever kind of news he wants, believe me.
Okay, cool. I thought that was so dumb. I was like, you have to tee that up to it. So just to kind of go into the world of pro wrestling a little bit, your friend Darren Young made some news about Nexus I wanted to ask you about. He said there was going to be a Nexus reunion at WrestleMania this year before everything went down to the pandemic. Is this true? Like, what can you tell me a little bit more about?
Yeah, I mean, I was called, I think, in January or February before this whole pandemic broke out. I was called by the talent relations team in WWE about something they wanted to do during WrestleMania to coincide with pretty much the 10th anniversary of Nexus. I actually turned it down. I didn't like the offer or the plan, so I turned it down. I believe I saw Darren actually just after that, and he told me he was going to go and do something with them, but I wasn't going to be involved in whatever it was.
Oh, wow, man! Was it going to be like an angle, or was it just going to be like an?
No, I don't think so. And in all honesty, if it had have been something more significant, I would have paid it more attention. But it was something that, to me, I just wasn't interested in doing. There was no benefit at all for me in any way of doing it, and I wasn't excited by it, so I turned the offer down.
Well, I know you've been active over with the NWA and stuff as of late, again, before everything kind of like shut down, right? So, like, what are your ambitions right now, pro wrestling wise? I mean, you pop off the screen, like you seem like you're there and engaged right now with the film industry. Are you interested in another wrestling run somewhere right now, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not retired by any sense of the word in terms of pro wrestling. I love doing commentary. I love working with NWA, and that's been a goal of mine for a long time. I started off in FCW at one point where I was working with Dusty Rhodes, being the color commentator down there in the late, 2008, 2009. I've always loved it ever since. So I'm really enjoying working with the NWA on that. Obviously, things are shutting down at the moment. Don't know when it's all coming back, but at some point it will kick off again. But in terms of in-ring, maybe at some point, if the right place, the right time, the right offer comes in, I could see myself dusting off the boots if I can find them. They're hidden somewhere. That's one of the few things I did not throw away was my boots. So I still have them. Might need some new trunks, to be honest with you. They might have got thrown out. I think all my old chairs and memorabilia got thrown out, but I still have the boots. So we can work on the rest.
Okay. And what do you think about the current pro wrestling scene? I mean, you have two companies on Wednesday nights right now, AEW and WWE. Impact is starting to secure more talent. What's your take on the current pro wrestling scene at the moment?
Without commenting specifically on the production or the content that's being put out, I think it's fantastic in general that so many places now are available for wrestlers to go and perform. There's NWA, obviously, WWE, AEW, TNA, Ring of Honor are doing some really good things. I'm good friends with Marty Skull, and I know he's heavily involved in that. And then, of course, New Japan on top of that. And there's a couple of others who I haven't seen much of, but I know they're kind of doing big things like MLW. And it's great as a wrestler who came up in an era where realistically there was only one worthwhile place to head to, which was WWE. Now there's this entire web of great places to go, and NWA and ROH just before this pandemic were kind of in cahoots together and having crossover programs and things, and talent exchanges and all this stuff. So I think it's a fantastic world right now for fans and wrestlers involved in it to pick and choose your spots, leverage companies against each other, so you actually have negotiating power for once, which we never had when I was coming through, that's for sure. So it's a healthier world, and that's without even commenting on some of the great stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and well, talk to me about like what you think of the content that is going out, because right now the only shows we're seeing are these shows with like no fans or like wrestlers used as fans. Have you seen any of this content? Like, what do you think of what we're getting?
Yeah, I've tuned in very briefly. I'll be honest with you, I struggle with the lack of fans there. I think it's an integral part of professional wrestling. I think even sports like soccer, they're bringing it back soon without the fans. I think it's going to hurt soccer somewhat, but I still think you have a goal of winning and losing in soccer, which is paramount. So I think there's still something to be drawn back into with that. I think with pro wrestling, the story is really the reaction of fans. And if that's not there, it's very difficult. Knowing what we know about how professional wrestling works, which we all know these days, it's very difficult, I think, to get too involved in it without having that emotional pull of the fans. So I'm not a fan of it not being there. I'm not criticizing companies who do that. I understand the financial obligations they have to ensure that the contracts they've signed are fulfilled, so they keep their money coming in. But in terms of a product that I would watch, I'm checked out on it.
Okay. And we ran some of your comments from the Talk is Jericho interview that you just did recently, which was awesome. You mentioned briefly in there about how you were frustrated there at the end. We're having this call with talent relations just before you left. I didn't know if you could talk a little bit more about like specifically what you felt like wasn't clicking for you in WWE, because there does seem to be more talent and rest at the moment from people that feel like they're not being used as well as they could be.
Yeah, I mean that interview I think was probably from a couple of years ago. I haven't spoken to Chris in a little while. I'm assuming that was the one from a couple of years ago. But
yes, my brother sent me clips, so it was part of my prep.
I think I did it when I promoted the first Iron Vengeance, actually. So I think it's probably 2018. But point still stands. Yeah, I left there for a variety of reasons. One of which was definitely burnout. I'd been on the road a long time, and I was on programming back when the brands were merged, so we would essentially be doing 5 shows a week. I was booked on everything, so I'd be doing 5 shows a week, and lucky to get one or 2 nights a week in my own bed, and constantly getting up at 4 a.m. So I was done. But really, the final nail in the coffin for me was from the creative point of view, where I was being given scripts and ideas and programs that I felt were given 30 seconds of thought by writing teams and management. And anything that I pitched or gave forward that I wanted to do or ideas to improve what I was being given were just constantly being turned down. So I felt that I was kind of wasting my time, and I wasn't getting to the parts of WWE or moving to parts of the card that I wanted to be in. I felt, in fact, I was constantly going downwards at that point. So I had no interest in continuing in that vein. So that was, again, another reason why I left.
So right now with as well as you're doing in Hollywood and everything, is the goal for you to, establish maybe some more credibility here, build some more demand up, and, there other talents have gone out, done this route before to be able to come back and, set their terms a little bit more for how they'd like to be presented, if that makes sense,
Yeah, I mean, I will say when I left WWE, there wasn't some master plan. I always contrast that with Cody, who left a couple of months after I did. And he had a master plan that he wanted to do. He wanted to go out and wrestle all these people on the indies. He wanted to get over to Japan, establish himself there, Ring of Honor. And then subsequently from that, this whole AEW opportunity bloomed for him. I didn't have that at all. I left WWE because I was miserable. I knew the last thing I wanted to do every day when I woke up was get on a plane and fly out to go wrestle for them. So that was it. That's okay. It doesn't matter what else I figure out. I'm not going to do this. And then from that, opportunities started coming in, like film opportunities and hosting a show on Netflix, which I did, called Ultimate Beastmaster. And these are the kind of things that happen when you're not in a restrictive contract that's taking up 100% of your time 365 days a year. So that was something, the film stuff and the hosting or anything else I've done has tended to come by accident almost. And it turns out that, okay, I enjoy this. So offers that come in, I always review them for 2 reasons. One, am I am I excited to do this? 2, does it pay well? Hopefully it does both. But if it's one of those 2 things, then I'm going to seriously look at it. And if it's neither of those 2 things, it's a no. And the vast majority of things that do come in are no to both of those things, and they get turned down. But one way or another, the things I've done have hit at least one of those 2 things.
I just imagine a shredder by your desk where you're just like, no.
I mean, it's the shredder hasn't had much work to do over the last 3 months. Let's be honest. It's been pretty quiet as of late for everyone, I think.
Well, Hollywood does seem to get going here. I'll wrap it up by asking you about that. I've seen more and more places are starting up locations again. I've seen film is starting up again. What's your plan here, man? What are the next steps for you in Hollywood? What do you want to do next?
Yeah, well, in all honesty, I had some stuff on the go in the UK with a production company out there that I was hoping would pick up some steam this year. We're trying to get a marine biology documentary show off that I would be hosting, which is something I've kind of been working on behind the scenes with my agent for a little while now, and that was starting to get a little traction, but obviously it got stopped in its tracks due to the pandemic. So I'm hopefully that kicks off again. And aside from that, I don't really know. I know there's stuff being mentioned that the film industry is starting to pick up again. I know that Starbucks, I live in Los Angeles, Starbucks near me aren't even open yet. They're doing, you can't go in there. So I don't know how realistic it is that any big film sets are going to be open here too soon. We'll see. I don't know. I just, it's a very strange time for all of us. And hopefully it picks up soon, and hopefully NWA gets kicked off again and we can get back to producing content on that. They currently have something called Carneyland, which is kind of a quirky, character-driven, non-wrestling show produced by NWA. So I encourage people to go check that out. That's some content that's kind of keeping people ticking over. But yeah, everybody wants to get back to producing the NWA Power Show, which is what we're known for.
How close do you think that is? How close do you guys think you are to resuming some filming, even if it's in front of a limited amount of fans?
Yeah, it's a Billy Corgan call. Billy Corgan and David Lagana are the 2 people in charge. I know for a fact that both of them have said under no circumstances will they produce NWA Wrestling or NWA Power without an audience there. It is filmed for the most part in Georgia, and I believe Georgia is opening up a lot sooner than California, for example.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think they're going to do anything that risks safety or anything like that. It's at the moment we're opening up, but there is this threat of another spike and another shutdown. I think it would be foolhardy to jump in too quickly, book a load of shows that then get shut down again. So it's like, you know what, we don't have to rush. Other companies are going to rush in ahead of us, and maybe let them dip the toe in the water. If that works, then we can jump off that. But again, I will say it's not my decision, and
sure.
As soon as it's given the all clear, I'm hoping we get back to it very quickly after that.
Well, I'm here in Billy's backyard of Chicago, which much like LA is, we're on lockdown. It's like a bubble, It's
Yeah.
like, Georgia and Florida feel like different countries when I hear about that.
Exactly. I used to live in Florida. It's too hot. I love that place, but it's too hot.
Yeah. All right. Well, Stu, hey, man, I want to thank you so much again. June 19th. I Am Vengeance Retaliation. It is going to be available. Where again? One more time. Can everybody go find it?
There we go. Let me get my notes back. This is for the US. It's, like I say, it's going to be out on the 19th of June on all major digital platforms and on DVD through Saban Films and Lionsgate. So there we go. Go check it out.
Yeah, do it. Go watch. It's awesome. It was like the best.
The trailer is available. If you go on my social media, the trailer is available on my Twitter, which is @Stu Bennett. So go check out the trailer. You'll get to see me getting beat up by Vinnie Jones, and then go watch the movie on the 19th, and you'll really get to see me get beat up by Vinnie Jones.